Hello, everyone. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening where you are, we're absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today. We've got some exciting updates about our APIwiz product that we can't wait to share. We genuinely believe you'll be as pumped as we are by the end of our chat. So let's dive right in. Okay, first up, let's chat about this buzzword you might have heard bouncing around, eBPF. To put it simply, eBPF stands for Extended Berkeley Packet Filter. Imagine giving developers a kind of microscope to peek into the systems in real time without causing any hiccups. That's eBPF. It's becoming a big deal, and not just because it's the latest fad. As our tech gets fancier and more spread out, we need nifty tools like eBPF to keep tabs on everything. Guess what? We're baking eBPF right into APIwiz, giving you the tools to make sense of your APIs effortlessly. All right, onto something I know bugs many of you, getting a clear picture of data zipping around in hybrid environments. Now, don't get me wrong, tools like Grafana and Splunk are fantastic for certain things, but sometimes sifting through the logs feels like hunting for that elusive needle in the haystack. Enter APIwiz's shiny new API tracing dashboard. It's like having Google Maps, but for your API calls. Traffic jams, shortcuts, detours, it's all right there, making your life just a little bit easier. Now, for everyone in the room wearing different hats, be it business analysts, developers, QAs, or our heroic site reliability engineers, we've got something for all of you. We get it. Each of you has your own unique needs and challenges. Business analysts, you're curious about which paths are making the cha-ching sounds. Developers, you want to know how your latest code tweaks are mingling with the old ones. QAs, you're all about crafting that perfect test scenario. And SREs, when things take a left turn, you need a crystal clear roadmap to find your way back. With our workflow visualizations, we're making sure everyone's singing from the same song sheet. It's all about unity and clarity. And because we know seeing is believing, we have Adib, our sales engineer, lined up to dazzle you with a live demo of all these new nifty updates.
We've seen how we can create our service workflows on the portfolio management dashboard. Now let's take the same workflow and deploy it across a multi-gateway model. So let's capture this workflow and let's also see how we can trace the deviations that occur in this workflow. In the case of Apigee and Kong, we're going to make use of the custom policies that compliance provides. And in the case of direct microservices, we'll also be leveraging a technology called eBPF that will help us to gain observability into our services that are directly running inside our VMs which are not fronted by gateways. As soon as your services see traffic, you're going to see the API Visualizer dashboard gives you the trace of all these workflows. And you can see how the data moves from one environment to another, right? From Kong to Apigee to over here, back to Kong, and then a couple of microservices as well. On inspecting this particular instance of the traffic, we see that we get a full measure of all the parameters that were passed during the request, as well as an associated compliance report that gets tagged along. Let's click on one of these instances to expand the workflow. So over here, I see a happy flow in which every single node has been executed on the workflow. And at the bottom, you'll also see a performance and timeline chart that gives you the exact division between the segments and how long they were taking. Let's now see one of the use cases where the workflow has been deviated. So you can see that the workflow executes till check consumer credit, and after that, it takes a path that deviates from the expected norm. It's supposed to validate the collateral, but it skips the validate collateral check and proceeds to check product code. And with technology such as eBPF, it becomes incredibly convenient to start observing your traffic no matter where they're located, be it on the cloud or on-prem. We capture the entire data, aggregate them, and provide you a visualization of your API workflows.
To wrap things up, our new bits and bobs aren't just flashy features, they're answers to the pesky problems we all face. We can't wait to see how you'll use APIwiz to make everything run like a well-oiled machine. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
No matter where you are in your API journey, be it just starting out, actively expanding your API portfolio, or at the latest stage of monetizing your APIs, APIwiz lets you manage your entire API lifecycle within a centralized control plane. The success of any API program has a large dependence on how well it's structured and defined right at the get-go. This means that knowing exactly how your APIs are defined, what are the business capabilities that they cater to, and what are the lines of ownership across your APIs makes a huge difference. The API program dashboard lets you define your APIs prior to designing and building them. This means that you get to define what are the exact set of APIs you have, and these could be varied across different business units within your organization. This allows you to define business goals and logically translate them into evolving APIs so your products align with cross-company capabilities. The portfolio management dashboard also lets you define what are those service workflows that are present inside your organization. Now, this helps multiple personas. This lets business and product owners to define what are those workflows that are going to be generating revenue for their organization. Developers can start referencing these workflows in order to build and integrate their services with existing API assets or create new ones from the workflows defined. QAs are going to make use of the portfolio in order to create test cases, as well as this also helps SREs when it comes to issue resolution in the runtime. The program dashboard also helps you assess key API program metrics across your design, build, security, reliability, and compliance, and also evaluates and computes the program maturity metrics as you see over here. The central schema registry on APIwiz lets you organize and create consistency by storing your team's common schemas to be referenced and reused across your API portfolio. Now, this helps you to reduce errors and create a sense of consistency across all your APIs. The intuitive visual editor makes data modeling a breeze on APIwiz. It also comes packed in with revision control, so you can actively switch between multiple revisions of the same data model in case you want to move out changes swiftly across your consumers, as well as a powerful state management that lets you contain your data models which is active, draft, and deprecated. You can also sync your data models to any source control of your choice. Create and adopt a design-first API development culture by using a Visual Design Studio that supports all the major versions of OpenAPI specifications, as well as Async API and GraphQL. Now, this empowers both technical users who are familiar with the OpenAPI syntax, as well as non-technical users such as business personnel who may want to quickly design and share an API within minutes. The built-in revision and version control lets users to quickly iterate, allowing API teams to roll out new product lines or offerings with little or no disruption to your customer experience. Keep developers notified with a platform that automatically tracks every single change that goes into your APIs, including breaking changes, new endpoints, improvements, and so on. Focus on crafting rich customer experiences with our automated documentation generation that gets generated with every change you make on an API. Integrate and collaborate by synchronizing your data with the source control tools that you're already using to improve your existing workflows. The baked-in governance ensures that every API follows its governance lifecycle. It has to be starting from draft, then move to review, finally it can be approved or rejected, finally published, and then later on retired. Enforcing the best set of design practices and standardizing your APIs across an organization can be extremely challenging. And that's why APIwiz has a dedicated API linting dashboard that lets you define and enforce your API style guides across your organization. This helps you to catch errors much earlier on in the lifecycle. Define rule sets at the global level that will be applied to every single API in your organization, or if you want to take it the more custom route, you could also define custom rule sets that will apply to a certain subset of APIs. Starting from scratch can be daunting. That's why we also provide you with inbuilt rule sets that let you start with over 160 industry best practices that can be defined and enforced on your APIs. Quickly spin up dynamic and virtual services in seconds. This helps to reduce the overall development and testing lifecycle dependencies. And this also helps you to quickly consolidate stakeholder feedback. To share your API virtualization amongst your stakeholders, just click Export, and you should see it appear inside the Collections panel. Once exported, you can easily access your API virtualizations from the API Collection Studio. The API Collection Studio also helps you to import and manage your other existing API collections as well. We support your existing investments so you can start importing your existing Postman collections or OpenAPI specs, as well as import the API from a curl. In case you don't have an OpenAPI spec, you can work backwards and generate an API design from your collection. With the federated API gateway on APIwiz, we have connectors to every major gateway out there today. With a centralized control plane to manage each gateway, organizations no longer need to rely on dedicated SMEs for managing and deploying the APIs across their API gateways. With low code and automation, we also empower citizen developers to start deploying APIs within a matter of seconds. Notice how we strictly adhere to the contract-driven lifecycle, which means that you won't be able to deploy any APIs which are in draft or review stage, and they have to get approved. You see a lot of the data that would otherwise have to be filled is automatically filled for you through data automation. With policy management studios across each gateway, it becomes easy for operational admins to enforce those set of policies that cannot be circumvented by developers when they are deploying their APIs. Just like your APIs, every config management across any of your gateway environments is controlled through its own governance lifecycle. With template-driven configurations that can be created once and reused across all your API deployments, this promotes reusability as well as security of your proxies that get deployed onto your runtime. With the baked-in migration connectors, it becomes really easy to start migrating data from one gateway onto the other. The built-in API catalog on APIwiz allows internal and external developers to organize, discover APIs, documentation, schema definitions, and code samples to promote reuse and reduce friction. The service registry on APIwiz lets you manage the complex communication mesh by auto-locating and registering services for load balancing and failover of middle-tier services. Capture all the vital metadata of each service and the environments that they are deployed on. Leverage APIwiz's consent management framework right into your applications. You can define your custom consent groups and map the data fields accordingly. Populate consent audit logs with every consent approval that's captured for review and regulatory scrutiny. The Test Studio on APIwiz lets you define your scenario-based test cases that can be executed on demand and in a custom schedule of your choice. Configure test and scenario-level dependencies as well as timeouts for your test cases. View the execution results of your APIs on the Test Studio Test Execution panel and also see the associated compliance report on the side. Set up monitoring with APIwiz and get insights into key performance metrics such as latency, uptime, downtime, enabling failure prediction and rapid proactive responses before an API goes down. The powerful charts and visualizations allow you to drill down into data as you need it, visualize the request, responses, and also benefit from the associated compliance report with each monitoring schedule. You can view information about your compliant and non-compliant APIs in terms of design level breaches as well as security level threats that are found in your live traffic. Get a breakdown of all your zombie and shadow API traffic as well. Get a resource level breakdown of all APIs in your production runtime View audit logs of every single transaction with a unique transaction ID, and each transaction will have the compliance information in terms of the design level breaches such as enums, data types, and any non-compliance with respect to your OpenAPI spec, as well as security. But that's not all. You can also configure custom security patterns such as your SQL injection attacks, JavaScript, XPath, and server-side threats. Get a head start with some of our preloaded patterns available for you. You can also mask sensitive information during runtime, configure the recipients of your compliance alerts and notifications. You can also configure certain fields to be excluded from your compliance reports, as well as enable encryption on your runtime traffic being ingested into compliance dashboard. We've seen how we can create our service workflows on the portfolio management dashboard. Now let's take the same workflow and deploy it across a multi-gateway model. So let's capture this workflow and let's also see how we can trace the deviations that occur in this workflow. In the case of Apigee and Kong, we're going to make use of the custom policies that compliance provides. And in the case of direct microservices, we'll also be leveraging a technology called eBPF that will help us to gain observability into our services that are directly running inside our VMs which are not fronted by gateways. As soon as your services see traffic, you're going to see the API Visualizer dashboard gives you the trace of all these workflows. And you can see how the data moves from one environment to another, right? From Kong to Apigee to over here, back to Kong, and then a couple of microservices as well. On inspecting this particular instance of the traffic, we see that we get a full measure of all the parameters that were passed during the request, as well as an associated compliance report that gets tagged along. Let's click on one of these instances to expand the workflow. So over here, I see a happy flow in which every single node has been executed on the workflow. And at the bottom, you'll also see a performance and timeline chart that gives you the exact division between the segments and how long they were taking. Let's now see one of the use cases where the workflow has been deviated. So you can see that the workflow executes till check consumer credit, and after that, it takes a path that deviates from the expected norm. It's supposed to validate the collateral, but it skips the validate collateral check and proceeds to check product code. And with technology such as eBPF, it becomes incredibly convenient to start observing your traffic no matter where they're located, be it on the cloud or on-prem. We capture the entire data, aggregate them, and provide you a visualization of your API workflows. The developer portal on APIwiz opens avenues to offer your APIs and expose them for public consumption. The developer portal that you see is completely headless and requires no CMS to manage the content. All the fluid elements that you see on the screen here are completely configurable from the admin panel. Customize it to your use cases and to your developer and consumer experiences. Also embed customer testimonials, as well as upcoming events and activities. The powerful API reference lets you to expose your APIs to your specific partners. And the interactive API documentation lets them play around with your APIs and know exactly how to consume them. Create powerful API guides and documentation for your consumers to know exactly how to use your API products and start integrating their services within. All the products and bundles that you create on the provider side of the journey will be exposed on your developer portal and available for consumption and subscription. Depict fine-grained use cases of how consumers can start using your APIs with complete descriptions, illustrations, and configurations. And this is all controlled from the same admin panel. The developer admin panel dashboard gives you a single view of all the products and entities that you've configured in the portal, tells you your top pages, guides, SDKs, API references, also gives you a split up of your developer demographics. And you can see that all the guides and documentations that we saw on the previous screen were all configurable from here. Manage the branding and customization of every section of your dev portal with interactive previews on the top. Logos, branding, and customizations can also be taken, as well as choose a custom color and color scheme that your portal can follow. Every user once registered in your portal will have to get activated and approved by an admin, and you can manage all the user roles and assignments from the user management page. You can also control what is the different roles that have access to different parts of your developer portal. As soon as developers create developer apps, it's going to become available inside the app approval workflow that you see over here. To foster community bonding and create better relations with your consumers, we have an inbuilt developer community. You can start posting on the forum to build relations with your developer and consumer community.